Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, the quietest, most reserved, least controversial of Queen Elizabeth's children, has just made a public announcement that is already sending shockwaves through Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and every royal household in Europe. He has proposed, and according to those present, formally requested, a historic, unprecedented alteration to the line of succession. And the way he did it? Calm, measured, almost gentle, which somehow makes it even more devastating. This is not gossip. This is not tabloid speculation. This is a living member of the royal family standing in front of cameras and microphones and saying the quiet part out loud. The part that successive monarchs, private secretaries, and constitutional experts have carefully avoided for decades. And the moment it happened, everything changed. Picture the setting. A carefully arranged press appearance at Bagshot Park, Edward's private residence. The kind of event that normally produces polite statements about charity work, the Duke of Edinburgh's award, or support for the arts. The kind of event that rarely makes the evening news beyond a 30-second clip. Edward stood there in a dark suit, no military medals on display, no grand ceremonial backdrop, just a simple podium and a small group of selected journalists. His wife Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, stood slightly behind him, composed but clearly aware of the weight of what was coming. Their children were not present. He began, as he always does, with gratitude. Gratitude for the support shown to the late Queen. Gratitude for the work of his brother, the King. Gratitude for the continuity that the monarchy represents. Standard, safe language. The sort of language that puts half the room into a gentle doze. Then his tone shifted. He said there comes a time when tradition must be examined not only for what it preserves, but for what it costs. He spoke of the burden placed on young shoulders. He spoke of the public's changing expectations of monarchy in the 21st century. He spoke of fairness, of duty, and of the need for the institution to remain relevant without losing its soul. And then he said the sentence that will be replayed, dissected, and argued over for years. I believe the time has come to reconsider the rigid order of succession as it currently stands, and open a formal conversation about whether the crown's future should rest solely on the principle of primogeniture as we have known it. The room went silent, not the polite silence of a press conference waiting for the next question, the kind of silence that feels physical. Let me be very clear about what this means. Prince Edward was not casually floating an idea over tea. He was not speaking off the cuff. Palace watchers who have studied his every public appearance for decades say this was deliberate, prepared, and timed with precision. He chose his words carefully, but he did not leave room for ambiguity. He called for a formal conversation, language that, in royal circles, is never used lightly. Formal conversations become committees. Committees become papers. Papers become recommendations. Recommendations, if the monarch and government allow it, can become law. And the line of succession is not a family preference. It is written into statute. Changing it requires an act of parliament, consultation with the Commonwealth realms, and the consent of the sovereign. It is one of the most constitutionally sensitive subjects in the entire British system of government. Yet here was the youngest son of Elizabeth II, the man who spent decades carefully staying out of the spotlight, standing up and saying the current arrangement should be examined. Why now? Why him? That is a question racing through every private dining room from Kensington Palace to Clarence House tonight. To understand the magnitude of this moment, you have to understand Prince Edward's place in the family. He has never been the rebel. He has never been the drama. While others generated headlines, Edward generated quiet competence. He took on the Duke of Edinburgh title after his father's death. He has championed the award scheme that bears that name. He has represented the crown on countless overseas tours with dignity and almost zero controversy. In short, he has been the reliable one, the steady one, the one the institution could always count on not to rock the boat, which is exactly why this announcement lands like a depth charge. When the most cautious member of the family says the system needs looking at, people listen. When he does it in public, the entire structure feels a tremor. There are already whispers about what precisely he has in mind. Some believe he is pointing toward greater equality between male and female heirs, a conversation that has been quietly ongoing since the succession to the Crown Act 2013 ended male preference primogeniture for those born after a certain date. Others hear something more radical, a suggestion that the line itself could be adjusted to reflect capacity, willingness, or the long-term health of the institution rather than strict birth order alone. Still others insist Edward would never go that far, that he is simply calling for an open discussion about the pressures placed on the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children, that he is thinking of the next generation, George, Charlotte, and Louis, and the lifetime of scrutiny that awaits them. But the language he used did not stay safely in the realm of support for the Waleses. It reached further. It touched the principle itself. And that is where the real shock lies. Because once you open the question of whether the line of succession should remain strictly as it is, you open every related question with it. Should the monarch still be required to be in communion with the Church of England? Should the prohibition on Catholics remain? Should the requirement for parliamentary approval of royal marriages stay on the books in its current form? Should the number of working royals be formally limited by statute rather than by private agreement? Edward did not answer those questions. He did not need to. Simply placing the succession on the table is enough to drag every other constitutional thread into the light. Inside the palace, the reaction is said to be controlled but intense. The king, sources claim, was informed in advance that his brother intended to speak on the subject of the future of the monarchy. Whether he was informed of the precise wording is less clear. The Prince of Wales is described as focused on his own responsibilities and declining to comment. Other senior figures are said to be studying the transcript with extreme care. Outside the palace, the reaction is already dividing into camps. Traditionalists are calling it reckless. They argue that the succession exists precisely so that personal preference, popularity, or temporary public mood cannot rearrange the order of the crown. They point out that once you begin adjusting the line for perceived modern fairness, you risk turning the monarchy into something closer to an elected presidency, a power from which there is no easy return. Modernizers, on the other hand, are calling Edward's intervention overdue. They argue that an institution that claims to serve the nation must be willing to examine itself when the nation changes. They note that other European monarchies have already adapted their succession rules, some more than once, without collapsing. They see in Edward a rare senior royal willing to say what many privately believe, that the current system, while stable, is not beyond improvement. But strip away the constitutional language for a moment and look at the man who spoke. Prince Edward is 62 years old. He has spent a lifetime watching the cost of the crown up close. He watched his mother carry the weight of it for 70 years. He watched his father struggle with the constraints of the consort's role. He watched his siblings navigate the glare in their different ways. He has raised 2 children of his own under that same glare, carefully shielding them as best he could. When a man like that stands up and says a system should be looked at, it is not the voice of a radical. It is a voice of someone who has measured the price and decided the conversation can no longer be postponed. Sophie, standing behind him, did not flinch. Those who know the couple say she has long been one of the most grounded and privately influential figures in the family. Her presence at his side was not accidental. It was a signal that this was not a solo flight of fancy. So here we are. A quiet duke has spoken a loud truth. The line of succession, that ancient, carefully guarded order that determines who will next wear the crown, has been placed under public examination by one of its own. What happens next will not be decided in a single afternoon. There will be private meetings. There will be legal advice. There will be conversations with Commonwealth leaders. There will be fierce arguments on both sides about duty, tradition, fairness, and survival. But the first move has already been made, and it was made by the person almost no one expected to make it. In the next part of this script, we will examine exactly what changes Edward may have in mind, the constitutional obstacles that stand in the way, the possible reactions from King Charles and Prince William, and why this single announcement could reshape the monarchy for generations. The historic moment has begun. Stay with me. So what exactly is Prince Edward proposing? He did not publish a white paper. He did not list bullet points. He left the precise shape of the chain deliberately open, which is, of course, the most powerful move of all. By refusing to hand the public a finished blueprint, he forced every interested party to fill in the blanks themselves. And the blanks they are filling are explosive. The most restrained interpretation is that Edward wants a formal, time-limited review of the succession rules with particular focus on the pressures facing the Wales children. Under this reading, he is essentially saying, the principle of primogeniture has served us, but the human cost on the next generation is becoming unsustainable in the age of permanent surveillance. A review could examine whether the line should remain strictly birth order based, or whether some mechanism, however carefully ring-fenced, could allow for adjustment if a future heir proved unwilling or unable to serve. A more ambitious reading goes further. Some constitutional observers believe Edward is opening the door to a conversation about capacity and consent. In other words, should the crown still pass automatically to the next person in line even if that person has made clear, over years, that the role would destroy them? European monarchies have quietly wrestled with versions of this question. Edward's language about the burden placed on young shoulders and the long-term health of the institution suggests he is at least willing to let that discussion begin in public. There is a third, still more radical possibility circulating in private, that Edward is signaling support for a narrow working monarchy whose succession is protected, but whose day-to-day obligations are formally limited by statute rather than by the current informal, slimmed-down arrangement. In that version, the line of succession itself stays largely intact, but the expectations placed on those within it are rewritten. Whatever the precise intention, the mere act of placing the succession on the table has already changed the atmosphere inside the royal households. Now the obstacles. Changing the line of succession is not a family decision. It is a constitutional act of the highest order. The Succession to the Crown Act 2013 was the last major adjustment, ending male preference primogeniture for those born after the 28th of October 2011 and removing the ban on heirs marrying Catholics. Even that relatively modest reform required the agreement of all the Commonwealth realms where the king is head of state. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the others had to pass their own legislation or give formal consent. The process took years of careful diplomacy. Any deeper change, especially one that introduced discretion, capacity tests, or further equality measures, would face the same requirement, only more intensely. Parliament at Westminster would have to legislate. The king would have to grant assent. The Commonwealth realms would have to be brought along. And every step will be scrutinized by politicians who see political advantage in either defending tradition or attacking privilege. Edward knows this. He spent decades watching his mother and father navigate the constitutional machinery. He would not have spoken without understanding that the path from announcement to actual change is long, steep, and full of opportunities for the entire project to collapse, which makes his decision to speak even more striking. He is not promising a quick fix. He is forcing the institution to confront a question it had preferred to keep locked in the private offices of private secretaries. What of the king? Charles has spent a lifetime preparing for the role he now holds. He is a man who values continuity and has often spoken of the monarchy as an institution that must evolve carefully rather than lurch. Those close to him describe a reaction that is controlled, thoughtful, and privately concerned about timing. The king is said to believe that public speculation about the succession, especially while the Prince and Princess of Wales are raising young children under intense scrutiny, risks creating exactly the instability the system is designed to prevent. At the same time, he has never been blind to the pressures the role imposes. The fact that it was Edward, not a more confrontational figure, who raised the issue may have softened the immediate response. Prince William's position is more complex. As the next monarch in line, any conversation about altering the rules touches him and his children directly. Publicly, he has maintained silence, which is consistent with his long-standing preference for controlled messaging. Privately, the picture is less clear. Some reports suggest he views his uncle's intervention as well-intentioned but potentially destabilizing. Others claim he has long shared concerns about the intensity of the spotlight on George, Charlotte, and Louis, and may quietly welcome a broader discussion, provided it remains orderly and does not become a free-for-all. The wider family is watching with a mixture of fascination and unease. Those further down the line understand that any formal review could, in theory, affect their own positions. Those who have already stepped back from royal duties see in Edward's words a possible validation of the choices they made. The atmosphere is described by one longtime observer as a quiet before a very British storm. Why does this matter beyond the palace walls? Because the British monarchy's claim to legitimacy has always rested on two pillars, continuity and consent. Continuity is delivered by the automatic nature of the succession. Consent is delivered by the public's willingness to accept that automatic process. When a senior working royal stands up and suggests the automatic process itself should be examined, he is testing the strength of both pillars at once. History offers cautionary parallels. The abdication crisis of 1936 showed what happens when personal desire collides with constitutional expectation. The quieter reforms of the 20th and early 21st centuries show that change is possible when it is carefully managed and broadly supported. Edward's intervention sits somewhere between those two poles. Not a crisis, but no longer a private conversation either. If the discussion he has started lead to genuine reform, the monarchy that emerges could look different, leaner, more explicitly consent-based, and more conscious of the human cost of the role. If the discussion is shut down, the institution will have signaled that even its most careful members are not permitted to question the foundational rules in public. Either outcome is historic. Outside the walls, the reaction has been immediate and polarized. Traditional commentators accuse Edward of naivety or, worse, of undermining the very stability the crown exists to provide. They argue that once you introduce the idea that the line can be adjusted for modern sensibilities, you invite endless future adjustments driven by popularity, politics, or pressure campaigns. Progressive voices, and a surprising number of younger royal supporters, have greeted the announcement with cautious approval. They see a senior figure finally acknowledging what many have felt: that the current system asks an extraordinary amount of children who never chose a role, and that an institution claiming to serve the people must occasionally ask whether the people still consent to the terms. Social media has, predictably, turned the moment into both solemn analysis and chaotic speculation. Hashtags linking Edward's name to succession reform and royal future are trending. Documentaries are already being commissioned. Historians are being booked for every major news channel. The story has legs, and those legs are moving fast. In the weeks and months ahead, we will learn whether this becomes a genuine constitutional conversation or a temporary storm that the palace successfully contains. We will learn how firmly the king intends to hold the existing line. We will learn whether the Prince of Wales sees opportunity or risk. And we will learn, most importantly, whether the public still believes the current rules of succession are the best possible arrangement for the century we are actually living in. If you want to stay with this story as it develops, the private meetings, the legal opinions, the reactions from Commonwealth leaders, the next moves from the King and the Prince of Wales, make sure you are subscribed and have notifications on. The next chapter is already being written. Thank you for watching.